Hey, welcome to episode 6 of the Handsy Comprehensive Exam podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Lindsay Oden. This week on the podcast, Hannah and I sat down with our friend and fellow grad student, Shannon Nutt, to talk about public history, feminism, and her research into California's surf culture. It was really interesting to get her perspective on the role of women in history and how gendered narratives dominate in certain historical discourses. We also talked about Harry Potter, and I think I'm going to take that audio and release it as a separate podcast later on, so be on the lookout for that. With that, let's go ahead and start the show. Today's episode is brought to you by erasers. Erasers allow you to remove those pesky stray pencil marks when you make a minor mistake. They also let you clean up your artwork when your pencil slips and you accidentally shade someone's skin too dark. Erasers also let you fix misspelled words, because everyone knows you're not smart enough to spell beautiful correctly on the first try. Erasers, removing your mistakes, you big dummy. All right, welcome to this week's episode of the Handsy Comprehensive Exam podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay.
And Hannah's here.
And we are here with our friend Shannon Nutt. Say hello.
What up?
And you are a graduate student. You're a PhD student at UNLV in the history department. And we thought we'd have you on and talk about what you do and what your research is about and all that kind of fun stuff.
And don't forget about our peanut gallery today, Bonnie.
Oh, yeah. My wife Bonnie is sitting in. If she has anything incredibly important to say, I'm sure she'll grab a mic.
Yell. Yeah. Just yell really loud.
All right. So the first question we have is, what is it that you do and what do you study?
I am studying U.S. 20th century history, specifically material and consumer culture. My focus is surf culture in Hawaii and California and the fashion that comes out of that. And I'm minoring in public history.
Awesome. Do you ever, are you going to think about including, popular culture into?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, for Dr. Gallo's class, we have to do place and memory. And so I'm doing Gidget, a popular culture icon.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she's like the one female surfer that actually got recognized. And so I'm going to look at her and larger surf culture, what it means. Yeah.
Sounds cool.
What drew you to this project?
To Gidget or larger?
The whole project. But if you want to talk about Gidget specifically, that's also very interesting.
Larger. Dr. Clemente was telling me about holes in the field, and she mentioned that there hasn't been a whole lot done on local designers in LA with street up fashion before 1980s. The designers were only really Hollywood influenced, and so there was a gap in the historiography. And the more I started looking, surf culture became extremely prevalent, especially with the migration to Southern California in the 50s and 60s after the World War II. And so there's just this expansion of the sport, and then it expands to popular culture and the Beach Boys and the surfing movies like Elvis movies, Blue Hawaii, and then with Gidget. And so I was really interested too, because in present day you see these people that have never seen the ocean wearing surf clothing, and they don't really understand the function of the garment that they're wearing, and they're totally divorced from its original purpose. So it was really fascinating to me how they can be wearing board shorts in Scottsdale, Arizona, and claim to be a surfer bro and have never seen the ocean. So that's kind of how the project originated. With Gidget, I found an oral history that she had done about 10 years ago, and they were asking about how the book came out in, I think, 57 about her. And they were asking if she had any part of writing it, and she said no, her dad had written it. And then they asked why she didn't have a part of it, and she mentioned that her dad said she wasn't a writer and didn't know how to present the ideas well enough, and so she was going to defer to him to write her story. So I thought that was really interesting that she didn't even have the authority to write her own voice, and her dad took that from her. So it kind of is similar with how you see female surfers in the culture too in the 50s and 60s. And so she just kind of came as a standpoint for that.
No, that's really interesting. So I want to come back to that, but let's do kind of maybe a chronological march through where does surf culture originate, and then how is it co-opted by Americans in the 20th century, like you mentioned?
Okay, so surf culture starts in the Pacific Islands. There's not a for sure origin date because there wasn't a written culture. So we all are working under the assumption that it's at least 1,500 years old. Most specifically, islands like Hawaii, Tahiti, and Australia all have origin points with the sport around that time. But it was really heavily embedded in the Polynesian culture on the Hawaiian Islands. And the sport was done for sport, for competitions, for celebration, for religious purposes. It was an entire cultural phenomenon that they experienced. And they also experienced it completely naked, one with nature. And then in the mid-19th century, when missionaries came in, they were extremely offended by the nude bodies, forced them to cover up. Swimsuits at that time, I don't know if everyone knows this, they're 100% wool, head to toe, so extremely heavy when they get wet. They don't dry very fast. And so you see a huge decline in Polynesian surfing, and it doesn't really expand out until you get progress in materials like cotton and rayon, and eventually spandex to come into surfing materials. And so it comes to the mainland because these white men either go for military purposes or vacation purposes to Hawaii and learn these surfing practices from what they're called beach boys, which are Polynesian locals teaching tourists how to surf, and then they go home. And so a lot of these men are from California that either travel to Hawaii or get stationed in Hawaii.
Now, this is in the 40s and 50s?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
30s, 40s, and 50s.
Okay.
And so then they return home and start surfing in Southern California. Jack O'Neill actually is credited in the, I believe, 50s, early 50s with creating the first wetsuit so you could surf in colder climates like Northern California. But it spreads from either vacationers or military men going to Hawaii and seeing these locals.
So then what is the process of going from people who surf on the islands, they teach the whites who then take it back to California? What is the process then by which people who don't surf come to wear the clothing and adopt that kind of attitude?
Well, okay, so this is what I'm still researching right now, so this may change by the time that this airs. But you have these individual surfers that come up with designs for a more functional garment while out on the water. And so there's men like Jack O'Neill, there's, oh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the names, but the founders of Hang Ten, Jams, and Birdwell Breeches. And these surfers either go to their wives or seamstresses, and they have them produce their individual designs. From there, they go and sell these designs to local surfers out of the trunk of the car. That expands to local surf shops. Once local surf shops pick them up, tourists start buying them then. And then by the late 70s and early 80s, you see an expansion of the market for these brands getting into department stores. So once they get into department stores, the main stores are like Macy's and Lord & Taylor, which are based out of New York. So they're an East Coast store, and they carry them through their nationwide branches. So yeah, it expands through the marketing. And it's really interesting because I'm trying to flesh out now if that was their intended purpose, was to reach mass culture and have them extremely popular, or the other thing that I've also found is, were they interested in reaching international surfing markets, and that was their best way to do it? Because when you actually look at the surf shops and the local surfers, they're very inclusive, and there's like a code that they live by, and they're not really excited about the Scottsdale surfers wearing the same clothes that they are. And so it's hard to tell if that was the purpose of these brands, to blow up, or if they were trying to remain authentic in the surfing world and just reach surfers in South America, South Africa, and the Pacific Islands easier.
Were the original like designs of the clothing more utilitarian, or do you think like, was there a shift from utilitarian clothing to more stylized, like surfer style? Like, I don't know if that shift would maybe tell you when the shift in like.
Well, so it was utilitarian and style when these guy surfers started doing this. It was 59, 60, and 61 when these designers really exploded. And it was because these surfing garments were still relatively modest. They were either one piece or very long, like mid-calf. And so these surfers raised them to either at the knee or above the knee to make it easier to wear and also quicker drying. And so that was their function. And then it expanded out from there. So they have, which is really interesting, and I don't know if this answers your question, but the local surf shops have different colors and patterns than like the Macy's does. So there's another layer of like authenticity of where you actually purchase your garment, and it's a easy read for someone in the know. Like they're not the ones that go out to Macy's are not the ones that are sold in the local surf shops.
Are the people making the designs for Macy's from the East Coast doing an imitation of West Coast style, or are these West Coast designers who are doing something that is specifically different for Macy's?
This style is similar because even if you go and buy a pair of board shorts from Macy's, you're still going to get the pocket for your keys or something as a surfer, and you're also going to get like the wax scraper even though you don't need it. So like the style is going to be the same. It's just different material for function, because Macy's, the people that sell them, they don't need their board shorts to last necessarily like 5 years. And whereas surfers actually need them to hold up to a little bit more of a beating. So I think the material is a little different. And then based on the material, the colors and patterns are a little different.
Are you just mainly focusing on clothing, or have you thought about, I don't even know if this exists, but like other types of material culture that's characteristic of surf culture?
Well, other people have done like tiki culture.
Okay.
Of like, Philip gave me a book about tiki culture that melds basically like Pacific Islands and Native American culture into like what we understand as the tiki bar and like tiki statues now. So that's been done, and there's been some work on like the Hawaiian shirt, which are like the two material culture things that I think of that kind of blow up from Polynesian culture. So I don't know how to
no
expand
puka
it.
shells.
No, I don't think I want to do puka shells. We'll see. Maybe if they fund me to go to LA and do some research, I'll talk about seashells.
Okay.
I guess this will help us transition into the next part, but I'm wondering, what is the small part of this project that you're doing for the public history class that we're in right now?
So this is the Gidget focus, and I'm looking at her in a couple different ways because she was extremely popular in her movies, her book. She had a couple spin-off novels that were done. She didn't play herself in the movies. She didn't write her own books, but she's like held up as this female surfer icon. But it's really interesting that she's always accompanied either by her father or a love interest while out on the water. She was never solo. And the second part is like I'm looking at her now, how she's celebrated. So there's the museum called the Surf Heritage Museum and Cultural Center in Southern California. And they released they teamed up with Surf Magazine for their 50th anniversary. And they released the 50 most influential surfers on the sport, and she was number 7, but they used her real name and not Gidget, and so no one knew who it was. And so it's this disconnect between the person and the icon, and then cultural norms. And then she also has a star on the Surf Walk of Fame, and I think it's either Huntington Beach or Santa Monica. Whereas these male surfers are getting these full statues done and dedicated to him. And she is, either a star by her pseudonym name that no one knows, and she's just kind of left in the dust.
So it's a conception of how she's remembered in the cultural memory when we're telling the narrative about surf history or history of California and things, in the ways that she has been marginalized.
Yeah, well, and marginalized and held up at the same time, because she's idealized as this like icon of a female surfer, where she is, you know, accompanied by a man, so she is out on the water, not alone, so she's not going against this female identity or female norm at the time. But they call her Gidget, which is short for girl midget. They don't use her real name, and so she's almost forgotten. She's like this icon that doesn't exist in real life in her real personality. She's only this performance of a Gidget. And so even today, she's like this hostess at a surf restaurant in Southern California, but she's a hostess as Gidget and not her individual person. So yes, how she's idealized and put on this, you know, pedestal, but also how she's forgotten as an actual person.
I'm just trying to download this so I can remember that you talked about her, so I can include her in the show notes.
Okay. I can send you some links on her when I go back to my house.
Would love that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll just share the Wikipedia link.
No, please don't.
Everybody go.
Yeah. Because when you go to the Wikipedia link, you actually only get her like Hollywood bio, and it's not her. It's Gidget, the character Gidget. So it's the books and movies and the actresses that played her, and not the actual person that it's based on.
Well, isn't that even worse?
Yeah.
Let's move on then, because I think talking about the way that she is remembered and this idea of cultural memory, I want to talk to you about public history, because that's your minor, and you've been running the show in terms of being, I mean, I think the liaison between the faculty and everybody else for a lot of these public history projects. And Hannah, I know you have as well, and we've talked about that. Oh, now you're smiling like I've said something wrong.
No, I'm just thinking about all the fun public history things I've done that make me smile.
Well, in that case, I want to talk to you a little theoretically about public history. So my first is
well, do people know what public history is?
Yeah, because we talked about it in episode 2.
Okay, right, with a little bit,
we talked about it in episode 1. But if you want to give us, what is your idea of public history? We'll start there and then branch out for some other questions that I might have for you.
Okay. Well, my idea of public history is actually how historians engage with actual people and not...
Because historians aren't people.
Well...
We are a different species.
No, not that historians aren't, but sometimes when we get into writing and researching, we forget the impact that our work can have on actual people. We think about the journals that we're going to publish in. We think about presenting it at a conference. We think about theoretical debates with our colleagues, but we don't think about how we're talking about people in everyday situations. And so public history, I think, bridges that, and it forces the historian to look at the public and see what they're asking for from historians and try to respond to that. And it encourages non-traditional resources, such as oral histories, that are not necessarily recognized in the archival process for regular non-public history programs.
I think that's a really interesting answer, because it raises a lot of, I think, what are theoretically problematic aspects of public history. So I'll start with this question, which is to say, what do you think is the goal of public history? Is it to educate people, to change their ideologies, to disrupt their beliefs, or is it something else? What do you think?
Well, it's really hard when you set out to do, like, for an instance, when you set out as an exhibit to educate people, because you run into the practicality almost immediately of writing labels and finding objects, because for labels you have about 60 words, and so how are you going to educate someone in 60 words? And if you go longer, they're not going to read it. So I would love to ultimately say it's the goal of education, because I feel very strongly about education, but I think that public history does what, to the general public, what historians try to do to their own field. And I think that it asks people to think about the world slightly different. So to just step out of your comfort zone and try to see something else from a different point of view. And I think that exhibitions and statues and memorials are an easy way to do that, because there's not a whole lot of reading. There's not a whole lot of research the public has to do. It's something that can be done, or it's easily accessible, I should say.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it doesn't necessarily, like, you shouldn't learn everything you can learn about Gidget from an exhibit label, but it should at least spark some kind of imagination in the reader to make them want to go out and learn more about something.
Totally. But I think that by putting Gidget as if we had a Gidget exhibition, we can tell these stories that I just described to you as what I'm writing a paper in, but I get to tell those stories that the general public's actually going to access. Whereas, when we write in journals, we run into paywalls, we run into issues of the public actually wanting to read it or knowing where to access it.
And reading 30 pages about something. And,
right.
And knowing, because when you submit for a journal, there's a certain level of, I would say, like a template that you have to follow, and that the public might not be privy to that.
Totally. And I think that just exhibits allow you to engage and show different materials that you can't necessarily access in a journal article. So you get photographs, you get material culture, you get oral histories, and they can actually see, touch, listen with their own eyes, ears, hands.
It's way more immersive than reading.
So what I'm hearing from you is that you do want to disrupt what people think or what they possibly know, or maybe the myths that they come to an exhibit with, already established in their consciousness, and then to change that a little bit through perspective. And I'm wondering too, because I know you guys have had a lot of problems with your exhibits, given that the people who are running the exhibits, the people who are donating the objects or the subjects of the exhibits, like Liberace and the Culinary Workers Union, that there were certain things that they wouldn't allow you to say. And I was wondering if you could touch on that and the kind of problematic aspect that it might point to in public history generally.
Sure. It's, Liberace, I think, is an icon, and he's kind of turned into a gay icon. And Dr. Clemente and I wanted to touch on his gay iconness, for lack of a better term, in the exhibit that we did. And we were not allowed to reference his relationships with men in the exhibit title. We did reference it in labels that we produced and in the exhibit space, but it wasn't allowed to be in the title.
What were you thinking about putting in the title that was so offensive to the people who were donating the objects?
And I can't remember the exact title of how we phrased it, but it was something about displaying the awesome costumes of Liberace. It was like coming out of the closet, that reference, something about coming out of the closet with his costumes. So that's, they still hold, the Liberace Foundation still holds this idea that we shouldn't be able to talk about this because he didn't talk about this. And even when I conducted the oral interviews with two of his designers, they were really offended with the HBO documentary that faced it head on, because it was based on the book of one of his lovers. And so they were really offended that it was in the spotlight, and it took away, they feel like it took away from the actual man. And so I think that the foundation's holding on to that idea that they want, it's the same, and I think it's the same kind of idea of Gidget. They're holding on to this icon instead of the individual person.
Right. So when you think about then the way that you would put together an exhibit, and specifically in the title, which is what is going to draw people into the exhibit, or it's going to be maybe the only interaction they have with the exhibit for the vast majority of people. And so I think that it's a really interesting study in how you're limited in the kind of narratives that you can tell because of the public nature of the history you're doing. Whereas in academic history, of course, we're limited in a lot of ways about what we can do and say. But there is a certain level of freedom where we can present these kinds of counter narratives, I would call them, and say, he was a gay icon. Why are we hiding from this? Isn't this an important cultural moment that we should be able to talk about gay icons? And I guess that's what the major breakdown that I'm having with these kinds of exhibits is that the editorial control or the intellectual control you have over them is constrained, and that's a big problem for me. And I don't know how you think you could deal with that going forward.
It was a little frustrating, but the Liberace exhibit, from the time that we said yes to the time that it was opening night, was 4 weeks. So there wasn't a whole lot of time to dwell on.
And you couldn't combat them or anything.
You just have to 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
You just have to go with what they give you and then do it.
Well, I mean, I selected all the costumes with Dr. Clemente. So we felt like we were still getting some of the message that we wanted. It may have not been in the exact way, but I felt like once we conceded on the title, they were more willing to work with us on what went on in this space. So, and I think that I know with the culinary exhibit, a lot of people were upset that they didn't get to say the message exactly how they wanted to say it. But I think that that's the misconception with how you do public history, because it's not about the message that you necessarily want to say. It's about the objects that you have, the people that you're working with, and the purpose of the exhibit. So with Liberace, we were working with the Cosmo, and these amazing pieces of art were sitting in storage and were not getting celebrated. And so we wanted to celebrate these artistic, beautiful designs that the Cosmo had the space for. So that was the point of that exhibit. And then with the culinary, the library's trying to get their stuff. They want their papers, they want their photographs, they want their special collections. That was the purpose of the exhibit, was to bridge UNLV and the Culinary Union. It wasn't to have an expose on the Culinary Union. And so I think that when you understand what the purpose of your exhibit is, it's a lot easier to work within those constraints.
So you're saying that you would rather make some compromises and do something that is perhaps 75% than 0% because everything remains locked in storage or something like that.
Totally.
Okay, and that's that real public aspect, is where you're engaging with people who are in the public who are non-historians, who don't have a methodological approach like historians. So you'd rather compromise with them and get what they have than like I said, allow it to rot in somebody's basement.
Well, and I think that, yeah, because when you compromise even just a little bit, because with the Liberace exhibit, we didn't know how many people were going to be in there, but we had hundreds of thousands of people come in and look at those clothes. And that was amazing. And with the culinary exhibit, we have people experience the union in a different light than maybe they're because sometimes when you say union, people get this negative response.
Right.
And so when you can show a different side and you ask them to engage in something that's very fundamental in Las Vegas history, I think it's worth it, because like Hannah said, you can spark an interest. They can go start to research themselves. We've had avenues where they can do additional research that we've already done, where we say more of what we want to say on like websites or QR codes.
Hannah, yeah, exactly. The QR codes at the Culinary Workers exhibit are fantastic, because it's something that you take the QR code and you scan it and you put it in your phone, you go home and you look at it later, hopefully. I guess that's what you're hoping for people to do.
Yeah, and you could listen to the voices of the people that actually experienced the things we were writing about. So
and I think
awesome.
And that's exactly the point is that I'm trying to raise, is that you really humanize the exhibits, especially because I didn't go to the Liberace one, but I understand like what you've said about it is trying to make who is Liberace the man, right? And I think with the culinary, you guys did such a good job showing the pictures of the people who are actually union members and saying these are the people, these are the individuals who are working, to accomplish a goal. And I thought that was really interesting. So that's a strong point in public history that I'm really proud that you guys were able to accomplish.
Yeah, and we did get the photographs for the Culinary Union. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and I mean, we have to give them back after we scan them, but
they're coming in. They're coming into special collections.
Yeah, they're already in. There's like 20 boxes.
And we're going to have those. Awesome. Yeah, we're going to have those online for other people. And I think that we were really disappointed with the culinary, because when we went over there originally, it was a shed and stuff was deteriorating and those objects were going to be lost forever. So we're trying to convince them to save them for future historians to do work.
Yeah, to hand it over to the professional archivists.
Yeah.
Who are going to save it and preserve it.
That's me.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. 20 boxes of photos.
Have they assigned that project to you?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Me and Dallas are working on it.
Oh, how awesome.
You get all of the culinary.
I know. They're like, you're the expert, Hannah. Write everything about labor history in Las Vegas. Pay me more. I hate labor history.
Well, I just did 118 boxes of Senator Chick Hecht. I didn't do anything with them. All I did was inventory them. But
why would they ever like say yes to 118 boxes?
Because he was a senator and he was Jewish, and so
huge.
He's important in two ways for special collections. In
okay.
that way.
Well, yeah,
I'll allow it because they asked me first.
He was a senator for one term.
Well, they're
He's
doing
got
like
118 boxes of stuff.
Aren't they doing the Jewish Heritage Project right
That's
now
exactly
with the
what it
oral
is.
histories?
That's why they had me go back through it and digitize the inventory, because it's really important to their project that they're working on right now.
Well, and for other oral history programs, San Jose University collected, I think, like 20 or 30 oral histories from local Northern California surfers that I'm like dying to get my hands on for my project. But I mean, without the public history department funding that, they wouldn't have been able to do that. Sure. So it helps us all in the long run.
I think that's a good place to leave it. We're going to take a quick commercial break.
Okay.
Hey, it's Lindsay here at Intermission. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at ScreaminVegan. Follow Hannah on Instagram and Twitter at hands_labyrinth. You can also follow Shannon at NuttyPug and follow her pug Lily at ThePugLily. Don't forget to like the Handsy Comprehensive Exam Facebook page at facebook.com/Handsy Comprehensive Exam. Email the show, handsycompexam@gmail.com. Be sure to be on the lookout for new musical tracks from my music project, Disciplinary Boundaries. Visit soundcloud.com/disciplinary-boundaries. And of course, follow the Handsy Comprehensive Exam blog at handsycomprehensiveexam.com. Let's get back to the show. Breaking back in, we're back from commercial break. We're going to release what we just recorded as like a mini episode, so stay tuned for a surprise discussion of one of our favorite literary works. Let's break
Faulkner.
back in. Welcome back to NPR's Faulkner Hour. Let's talk about your theory real quick, because I think you've told me before that feminist theory really informs a lot of the work that you do, and I'm wondering in what ways does it influence the ways that you do work?
Well, that's difficult to answer just like point blank, but I think that we just read a book by Joan Scott that I think has put feminist theory into a workable perspective on how to do history, and she has this model of gender where it's not just including women or having women's history. It's about studying the relationships between the genders and those binaries and the power structures that come out of the gender network. So I think that's how I've wanted to do it. I didn't know how to articulate it until I read Joan Scott.
Well, I think that's why that book is so important. Gender and the Politics of History. Yeah. And one of the most cited articles is an article that spawned that book, which is Gender as a Historical Category of Analysis.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that I was playing around with this when I did my MA in Victoria's Secret, because feminists were coming out in protest of this company, and I didn't see what they were seeing as a protest, a sign of protest, because I was on the inside working for the company. I worked there for 5 years and worked my way up from seasonal. And I saw them fostering internal development, very female organized, female empowerment, about being comfortable in your own skin. And so I saw the good parts of the company. And so that was my original inquiry about the feminist protest of this. And they were mostly protesting the images that the magazine portrayed. And so I was interested in that, and I actually found the first couple catalogs that they produced had both men and women's bodies in the magazine, and then they removed I I think after their third year of publication. So I've been studying this for a long time, and I've always wondered how I can be a feminist and not always side with feminist protests on certain things. And I think Victoria's Secret was a really poignant example of that.
It's a really good way to see that there are feminisms, right? That
Totally.
there's a multiplicity and a plurality of the ways that people have approached gender and women and representation and femininity and things like that.
Yes.
So how then do you take that perspective and apply it to something like public history?
I don't know. I can't think of off the top of my head how I would do it for public history, but I can tell you about the project that I'm working on. These male surfers are fully recognized in both the surfing community and the business community at large as founding these brands, but they wouldn't have been able to do what they've done without their wives or business partners' assistance, from sewing the actual board shorts to Birdwell was actually started by a female. And then Hang Ten's marketing was developed by a female, and they're pretty much left out of the discussion for these surf corporations. And so I'm studying this binary of why these men are so celebrated and recognized with these designs, but it wouldn't exist without these females.
So your project is part reclamation, but also reinterpreting what the narrative is.
Yes. Well, and just exploring why they've been left out when they were such an integral part. And like one company, Jams, he was a military man. He was in Southern California. He married a Polynesian woman, and then they moved back to Hawaii to start this brand. So, I mean, there's two aspects that are totally ignored with this Jams company, and she's female and Polynesian, which is where surfing arguably was invented, and yet he's recognized as the founder.
Excellent.
Well, I mean, you could talk about 50 Shades of Grey in that way if you want.
I'm boycotting this movie on principle.
I've never read the books, never read the
Me
movie, and I don't think that we should be celebrating domestic violence or improper BDSM. So.
How about the constructions of the female character in the book, who is ostensibly the protagonist and yet is completely two-dimensional, completely submissive, right?
And is a virgin.
Oh.
Yeah. Of course she has to be a virgin, right?
She has to be, because if she wasn't, then the whole experience of this, not deviant sexuality, because it's not to me. I don't give a shit. But
it's
like
not,
the construction of it, it's like, it's dirty, it's taboo, and it would be meaningless if she wasn't a virgin, because she'd already be a slut.
Well, and it's not really BDSM. It's stalking and domestic violence and all inappropriate relationship habits. So it's not, yeah.
I'm gonna cut this part out too.
Do it.
Anyway, okay.
Inappropriate.
Well, let's do everybody's favorite part. Let's move on to the lightning round.
Yay!
Lightning round.
I don't have my sound effects out today.
Wah, wah, wah.
Lightning round.
Let's see. Pick 5 numbers between 1 and 30.
5 numbers. Okay. 3, 5, 22, 30. We'll do 29 too.
All right. Lightning round.
Lightning round.
Question number 3. Your plane crashes and you get stranded on a deserted island with only one movie on your iPad. What movie did you just download?
Well, it would be series of movies, obviously, and it would be the 8 Harry Potter movies.
I said the same thing, but I chose Half-Blood Prince.
Yeah, I can't just choose one of them. I have all of them, but it's in the same universe, so you have to take that for an answer.
Okay.
Lightning round.
Number 5. Who's your favorite philosopher?
Jesus.
J.K. Rowling.
Jesus? Sorry,
J.K.
I hit my
Rowling.
mic.
Yeah.
Jesus
Wait,
and
who?
J.K. Rowling.
I'm a disciple of J.K. Rowling. I think the idea of Jesus is super interesting, and I think the religion that follows him has a distorted practice of what is written down as the actual man, that we don't know if the actual man even existed. But I think the philosophy behind the fictitious Jesus, I guess, is.
All right, maybe I should reword this question.
Yeah, well,
Who's
maybe.
your favorite 20th century philosopher?
Yeah.
Such a
Wait.
presentist.
I know Jesus doesn't count.
No. I'm going to leave that answer in. I think it's fine.
No, you probably shouldn't leave that in. You should. That's just for you. 20th century philosopher. Can I pick a new number?
Pick a new number.
What number was that? 5?
That was number 5.
6 then.
No, this is the whole point, is that some people get the same question and they come up with a different answer. Okay, number 6. What song are you currently jamming that you can't stop listening to?
Okay, there's 2. One is like the acoustic Kanye West Rihanna song. Oh my god, you should listen to that. And then the other one that I'm obsessed with is one of my favorite bands. It's finally coming out with a new EP, Incubus and Absolution Calling, and they released it, and I love it because it sounds like old Incubus from Science days. Makes me happy.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be really into Incubus like 10 years ago.
With
too.
Morning View.
No, I'm trying to remember what album. Shit. See, now I sound like a bumbling idiot. I can't remember my favorite songs by them. Hold on.
Morning View is the one that came out about 10 years ago. 'Cause that's...
I listened to Make Yourself,
okay.
and that
That was-
album,
Yeah.
pretty much from like start to finish, was a major part of the soundtrack of my high school years.
Yeah.
Lightning round.
Next question. Question 22. Who is your favorite film director?
This is really bad because I don't remember film director names. This is a question that Max should answer because he'll have a 30-minute answer on this. But I really liked, I'll say Chris Columbus, just because I've met him in real life. And I love Mrs. Doubtfire and the first 2 Harry Potter movies. So Chris Columbus.
Good. That's the right Christopher Columbus.
Okay.
Because there's another Christopher Columbus I think historians are no longer a fan of.
His
Yeah.
films were terrible.
Yeah. I don't
Whole genocide thing.
I don't recognize those in the same universe because I just see him with like his Harry Potter jacket at the Giants games, and I'm like, that's the Chris Columbus.
Lightning round.
Question number 30. What is your favorite history book
Of all time?
of all time?
One?
Yeah, pick one.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Now I have to think of one that like changed my life. Probably Edward Said, Orientalism. Totally changed my perspective.
That's an excellent answer. I have nothing to say.
Lightning round.
Question 29. If you could go back in time, what would you fix?
Fix. This is a problematic question.
This is my
Fix?
favorite kind of question because there are so many different assumptions that you have to deal with. Like the word fix is so laden with connotations and cultural meanings that there's something broken about the past that we have to go fix.
Well, and it also places our modernistic ideals about what the past was and the representations of the past. So I don't know. Is there a problem to fix?
The Holocaust.
Well, I mean, those are the ridiculous answers that you're gonna get from people walking down the street.
The Trail of Tears.
I would fix one of 2 things: the healthcare system or education system from the beginning, from the onset. If we treated wellness and education, I think that we would be in a totally different spot than we are in the U.S. And I think that if we actually want to develop and progress and have a progressive ideal like we claim to have, we would fix those 2 things going forward. So I would maybe not go back and fix them to right now, but those are the things I would fix right now.
Is there like an identifiable time where you'd be like, I would go back to the year 1900 or something like that?
Well, I mean, I think that it starts with the New Deal programs. So if you could add, I mean, they added Medicare and Medicaid in those. And if they just went one step farther and included everyone on those health insurance policies, I think it would be a tremendous impact. And then education is based on a method from the 1700s where we have to...
And the normal schools and
right.
all that.
So I think that the way that we educate hasn't really changed since the 50s. So post World War II education system.
I like your answer.
Well, that's all the lightning round questions. So let's.
So you're gonna cut out the philosopher one, right?
No, I'm totally keeping that. I'll cut out the silences and the weird moments, but I'm totally keeping it.
You're keeping Jesus.
Yeah, we're gonna keep Jesus in this podcast. Let's move on then to.
I'm so awkward.
Guys, Jesus is really important to my life too. Maybe you don't know this.
Okay, so I think that I'm thinking of, which is really funny. If you watch the Newsroom episode, it's the finale for season 1, and they call the Tea Party the American Taliban. And he breaks down what the Bible actually says who Jesus is, and it's like everything that the Tea Party actually hates, which is take care of the sick, free healthcare, feed the poor, take care of children, donate all of your money. Basically everything that the Tea Party doesn't. So that's the guy I'm thinking about is Will McAvoy's version of Jesus from the Newsroom in the season 1 finale.
It's just like that bumper sticker that says, Obama is not a brown-skinned anti-war socialist who gives away free healthcare. You're thinking of Jesus.
Yep, that's exactly it.
All right, yeah, I can get behind that.
Okay.
Let's move on to recommendations. Hannah, what is your recommendation for this week's podcast?
Can I say The Man in the High Castle and Gilmore Girls?
Say it straight in the microphone.
Oh,
Just
it was not loud
exactly
enough?
what you want to do.
The Man in the High Castle, a new Amazon original pilot episode. And also Gilmore Girls, because it's the best show ever made. Shannon, what are your recommendations?
I second The Man in the High Castle, but I also want to plug, because I wish I had more time to go on Pottermore, because there's so much information to read about characters like McGonagall and Snape that you get a new point of view, and it's awesome because you get to toss gnomes and stuff. So, yep, go do it. And, well, that made me think of it because J.K. Rowling is having, like, her life published from the time that she started writing Harry Potter to, I think, 2013. So it's like a 15-year biography of J.K. Rowling's, and it's coming out. Yeah. I sent the link to you. Yeah, but it's going to be like $120 for the book. But
what?
I think that we're going to have to pull our money and buy one copy and have a book club.
read it out loud to each other.
We'll make our own audio version of the book for the podcast. How about that?
We could all read it and then have like a book club.
Yes. Also, apparently there's a Lifetime movie about J.K. Rowling. Did you guys look at the trailer, or did you look it up? Did I send it to you guys? I don't remember. Okay,
J.K.
Lifetime
Rowling
movie
might be my favorite success story, because everybody forgets that like she was a welfare mom, and because she was able to eat food and provide for her family from the government, that she was able to produce something and then became one of the richest people in the whole world.
Well, and she's no longer a billionaire because she donated half of her wealth to charity organizations. So she's no longer a billionaire status because of that reason, because she believes in paying it forward.
Damn.
See, Harry Potter works in all kinds of situations.
Well, my recommendation for this week is a comedian. His name is Hari Kondabolu, and his new album is 2042. He's a really smart comedian. He used to be like a human rights advocate and an immigration advocate, and now he's turned his intellectual project into comedy. And I think he's got great insights. So I'm going to close out the show with one of the jokes from his new album, and you should go check it out and purchase it through the link that I will put in the show notes. So let's go around the circle and just say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Farewell.
All right. Thanks for listening to...
Well, see you later.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Handsy Comprehensive Exam Podcast. Thank you. Thank you. Great job, everyone.
I'm not the one, right? I'm not the one who keeps bringing up 2042. How come I keep hearing about the year 2042 on the news? 2042, for those of you who don't know, is the year where, according to census figures, white people will be the minority in this country, right? They'll be 49%. No, who gives a shit? Honestly, who gives a shit? Why do I have to keep hearing about this? This number is not important to me. Are there white people in this country? That's who it's for, by the way. White people are freaked out. Are there white people in this country who are actually freaked out about this? Don't worry, white people. You were the minority when you came to this country. Things seem to have worked out for you, all right? But here's the bigger point. Here's the bigger point, right? 49% white doesn't make you the minority. That's not how math works, right? 49% white is only the minority if you think the other 51% is exactly the same, right? It only works if you think, well, it's 49% white people and 51% you people. That's the only way that works.